Hello, this is going to be a quick video on what to expect when I show up for a listing appointment. So I tend to call these, at least for myself, I call these the pre-listing appointment. So to me, a listing appointment is when we're actually going to be signing the paperwork, which a lot of times we can do electronically also. But for me, pre-listing, going out, and it could be a multi-step process, seeing the house. I could be seeing the house, gathering the information, then going back to the office, pulling together some comparative properties, looking at them, and then giving you, coming back out and giving you the information and paperwork and pictures of comps and showing you here's the price that we should list at and here's our pricing strategy. So it could be a multi-step process, could be a one-step process, just depends on where we're at, maybe the relationship we already have, if I've already been in the house. But typically I'm going out there, seeing the details of your house, essentially looking at the product that I'm going to be marketing for you. And it's also a time where we're getting to know each other a little bit more and feeling each other out and seeing if we're going to be a good fit to work together. And I'm also going to be asking a lot of questions. So I'm going to ask the time frame for what we are as far as looking. It is never too early for me to come out of the house and look at it. I've had clients say, well, we want to get some thoughts on listing our house, but honestly, we're not ready for several months. Or, hey, we're probably going to do it in next spring, and maybe it's summer, and they're not going to be ready till the new year. It's never too early for me to come out and take a look and give you pointers, particularly because one of the things that we're going to be doing is going through and seeing what things in the house I would recommend. Hey, maybe I make suggestions for fixing this or changing this or doing this repair or that repair. A lot of times too, though, I'll have clients, they'll say, hey, I know this needs to be done. And I'll look at it and I'll say, no, it doesn't. I had one client that was convinced that their front door needed to be replaced, and there was really nothing wrong with it. And sorry for the background noise there. One of the questions I'm going to ask you is, what do you love most about your house? Because that's probably what sold you on your house is probably what's going to sell the next person on the house. And so that's going to help us identify our target audience, our target buyer. And so I refuse to shut the windows in the room that I'm in because this is my favorite room in my house, my sunroom. So you're just going to have to hear my neighbor's demolition and landscaping going on in the background there, because I love this room and this is where I live most of the time, in this room. Sorry about that. But that's going to be one of the questions I'm going to ask you. What are your favorite parts of the house? Where do you spend the most time? Why did you fall in love with it? Because those are going to be things, those are our selling features. Those are our selling points to the next person. I'm also going to say, on the flip side of that, maybe what are the concerns you have with selling your house? Maybe there's something that you were leery of when you bought it. And so, maybe that's something, if it hasn't been addressed, maybe it's a busy road that you're nearby. Maybe it's, whatever it is. Maybe it's a deferred maintenance item that still needs to get taken care of. So we'll discuss those things. Maybe it's something we can change, maybe it's not. And like I said with the front door issue, it was something that did not need to get changed. Actually, I thought it was great. They thought it needed to be updated, but it was actually right there with what buyers were actually looking for, and they just didn't realize it, that the uniqueness of the door, and actually in the feedback that we got on the house, no one ever mentioned the front door as being a negative. So it's also good for me to walk through, and if you're planning on doing something, if it's not something that's going to improve your selling position, whether it's price or giving the buyer a better experience so they're more likely to write on your property versus another property, it may not be something we focus on. We may focus on some of those other things that are going to make a difference for you. Whether it's price or timing, because time is money, and if you're in a situation where you want to sell really fast, that's something to think about as well. So we're going to talk about logistics and time frame. Logistics, particularly if you have a house, if the house that you're in right now that you're selling, if you need to sell that to purchase another house, and we're going to be doing what's called a subject to sale, which a whole nother video on that. But if we're going to be doing that, then there's just logistics that we got to talk through. And that may take a little time of figuring out plan A, plan B, plan C for what works best for you. I'm going to get a tour of your house. I want to see your house. Do not worry if it's not totally picked up or picture ready. I'm not in there to take pictures of your house to list it. I may snap a few pictures only for my benefit, so that if I am going back to the office to do a little bit more research, to give you a better market analysis, then I'll just need that for my refreshing of, okay, that's what that room looked like. That's how that layout was. But don't worry, those are not my listing photos at all. I can give pointers to you if you want on what, like I said, what we could work on, repairs that may need to be done, or just touch-ups and things like that. That would be a good use of time or money or effort to get your house market ready. And it may be a situation where it's better to market it as is and not do any, repairs or updates, depending on the situation and the house. Sometimes that's the best route to go. So we need to talk about that as well. Because every situation is different, every seller is different, every target buyer is different. And so we'll talk about that for your specific house and situation as well. We'll go over the features that would be the positives, like I said, my sunroom that I love, or, the negatives, like we said, as far as, maybe it's next to a busy highway or there's that deferred maintenance items. And if we're not going to do anything about it or can't do anything about it, you can't move the highway, how do we account for that in our marketing? And how are we going to account for that maybe in our price? Or, what are the other things that we can draw attention to that will beat out those negatives? What are the positives that we can draw attention to? The other thing is talking about what the listing process looks like. It may have been a while since you've listed a house, or maybe you've never listed a house before. This is your first time selling. And even if you have sold before, every single experience is a little bit different because every buyer is different, every house is different, particularly if it's in a different area too. So we'll talk about what the process looks like, what the process looks like now. Maybe there's been some changes. There's always certainly tweaks and changes to our local contracts, and so we can go over that. Any inspections that we may want to do up front. Inspections is typically going to be a buyer's responsibility after they've made an offer on the price, or they made a price offer on the house. We've come to an agreement with them. We're now under contract, and then they'll do their inspections. It's called a due diligence period. And so typically buyer's responsibility to do those inspections and pay for those inspections after the fact to make sure that the price they agreed to on the house, that the house is in the condition that they expect it to be in, and no major defects and things like that. But it may make sense to do an inspection from the get-go. Sellers certainly can do that. We can do a pre-listing inspection and find out, hey, we don't want to get bombarded with potential repairs later, so let's kind of deal with it on the front end. A lot of times that makes sense to do that. I would say, particularly if a property has a well or a septic, it's a really good idea to have those checked out ahead of time, because those can be big ticket items, and buyers are most likely going to have those inspected anyways. And those are items that buyers sometimes worry about. Oh man, what is the condition of the well? What is the condition of the septic system? And to have that kind of taken care of on the front end can really put you in a good selling position as well, to just reassure that buyer, versus your property has already had that taken care of, versus another property, it's kind of a gamble. And even though, the sellers may say, well, we'll repair anything that comes up, you still don't know what's going to come up and what that ticket price is going to be, and if the seller really will take care of it. So from a buyer standpoint, if they can see, hey, here's the condition of these things and here's what's been done and hasn't been done, it's a reassurance for them. And taking out that unknown, which is really important, which brings me to another thing. I may give you some homework to do if you don't have it already, and that is listing out the updates of updates, repairs, new items that you've replaced while you've been living there, such as, hey, we got a new roof a couple years ago. Okay, give me the year that happened, and was it a tear off? Was it an overlay? Give me any details that you have on that. Maybe they replaced the gutters and soffits at that time too, or did something with the chimney, anything like that. That's good information to have. The year of your furnace and air conditioner, whether you have it serviced every year. If you have those service records, that's always helpful as well. And all things like that, that's good information that buyers want to know. And so we want to be able to have that information ready and available to them. So it sometimes takes some time to put that together. So that's something I'll be asking. You don't necessarily have to have it right when I'm there, but it's a good idea to start gathering up those things. The next thing is questions. You may have questions for me. What is my process? What does it look like? What are the next steps? Let's talk about the market. I'll talk about some comparable properties that have sold in the area. Let's talk about what's active. What is your current competition? You know, what's actively out there that kind of is close to yours as far as a comparable property. You're going to hear me say comps, and that means comparable property. I'll try not to use lingo that is not in everyone's everyday speech. But comps is comparable properties, and we'll go over, you know, also what's pending. So, or maybe what's expired. What did people put out on the market and it didn't sell for whatever rhyme or reason? Let's dig into that. Maybe your next door neighbor didn't sell, and they were listed at the price that you want to be listed at. Okay, we'll dig into that. We'll find out a little bit more. Maybe there's something unique with that property, or maybe something with the neighborhood that buyers just weren't happy with, or whatever it is. That's what we start to uncover and figure out, so that way we can put your listing in the best position for selling, and be realistic. You know, I don't blow smoke. I'm very realistic on what numbers are going to look like, what the trends are, what the numbers are, because I think that's really important. I would rather have that conversation up front than months down the line when it hasn't sold. And then you're wondering, well, you told me this was what it was going to sell for, and now here we are, and it hasn't. And I would rather be upfront about, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what I recommend. And we go from there. The other thing is I might take some measurements. I look at county records and I look at tax records and things like that. And so I may take some measurements and double check what it is that the county has, or maybe what's showing up online on Zillow and things like that. Just because, not that we can easily go in there and change that information, but that way we have that information, and I have that information when a buyer comes forward and they say, hey, well, you know, you have this at this much square footage, but over here it's listing this. Why is that? We can come up with an answer, and we can say, well, here, we actually went and had this measured. Here's why we think the county says this, because they weren't taking into consideration this addition that was done in whatever year, or whatever it is. We can start to identify those possible hiccups or questions that people have and have answers ready for those. Because again, it's taking out the unknown for the buyers. What can we do to take out the unknown for the buyers so that they can feel ready and excited to place an offer on your property? So those were just my quick thoughts on things that we'll talk about when I show up for a listing appointment, and things I can go over, because just telling you about my marketing is a big part of it, but there's so much more too, to really drill down into the nitty-gritty of what goes into the listing process and the marketing and selling process, and ultimately getting you to the closing table, which is where you want to be. So thanks for listening, and check out some of the other videos.